Welcome to Satsang.
Hello, Vishrant. Can you please speak about the topic, are you holding yourself in lower consciousness?
The answer to it is that most people wouldn't know that they're holding themselves in lower consciousness. They wouldn't understand that their constant dreaming or thinking is actually keeping them in lower consciousness. And so, in a lot of ways, the question's redundant. People don't really keep themselves in lower consciousness because they don't know what they're doing. Higher consciousness is something that people work towards. It's not a given. We're not given higher consciousness. We're basically given lower consciousness, the animal that survives, wants to survive, seeks pleasure, avoids pain. But the bottom line is, really, that is lower consciousness. When we start to witness our mind and we start to see how the mind ticks, our consciousness levels start to go up, particularly if we're willing to take away anything that keeps us locked in lower consciousness. And so that's up to the individual. It's up to you. You're the one that's going to keep yourself in lower consciousness, or you're the one that's going to take you to higher consciousness. No one's going to do it for you. There needs to be a commitment on your part to moving towards higher consciousness. And that commitment has to be pretty total, because lower consciousness is easy. It's easy to be caught in dream. It's easy to be caught in your mind. It's easy to contract and resist life. It's actually quite difficult to move through life in a way that is open, that is not contracting, that is not dreaming, but is just here, just present. That takes a fair bit of practice. And that doesn't happen by itself. Are there any questions, any statements, or any challenges to this teaching today?
The first question is as follows.
We've got a sound problem, Tosh. I'm hearing a very loud hiss coming through the system, and I don't know what that would be about. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
Possibly you have the original sound on.
Original sound on. I don't know what that means. Sorry. How do I adjust it?
If you go into your audio setting.
Yes. Yep.
The background noise suppression, is that on low?
Hang on a second. I'm going to need to adjust my computer screen so I can see. It's on low, yes.
Okay, if you close the settings, and then on the top left of your screen, there should be a button that says something like turn on original sound or turn off original sound.
Okay, so what do you want me to do? Could you say that again, please?
On your screen, on the top left,
Okay.
can you see a button that says turn on or turn off original sound?
No, not at all. What did you say before that? I've missed something.
Before that, you can exit the audio settings now, if you're still in there.
Okay, I'm out of the audio settings.
Now on your normal Zoom screen,
yes,
on the top left somewhere, there should be a button that says turn on or turn off original sound.
Oh yes, it says turn on original sound. I've done that. How's that sound?
Oh no, that's made it worse.
Okay.
Okay,
I've turned it back on.
and the other thing to check is which microphone are you using. So if you click that little arrow next to your microphone button,
Microphone button.
the bottom left.
Yeah, I'm trying to navigate two screens at once here, so it's a little difficult. The bottom left of what?
Of your screen, where it
What?
says mute, you know, where it says mute,
Oh, yes. Yes.
the little arrow. If you click the little arrow,
Yep.
it should say select a microphone. Can you see which one is
It says
selected?
live streamer cam microphone,
Okay.
which means it's connected to the right one, doesn't it?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
In that case, I do not know what else it could be.
Okay.
We could try, if you go back into your audio settings, we could try turning your noise suppression to medium.
Uh-huh. I'm just looking at my microphone up here. I've got my sound up very loud. Let's see if I can take that down. Does that make any difference?
No, I can still hear the background. Oh, it's gone a little bit softer.
Okay. I really don't know, Tosh, but this we can't record while we're doing this. This is not possible.
Can I suggest trying to turn your noise suppression so underneath your microphone levels inside your audio settings?
Inside of where? Sorry, I'm just going to have to turn I've just turned the volume down a bit low and I'm having trouble hearing you. Go again. What did you say?
Inside the audio settings for your inside the audio settings for Zoom.
Audio settings for Zoom. Okay, hang on a second. I have to bring that up. It's on a different screen. That's in preferences, isn't it? Yes. What about? Yes, I'm there.
And then if you scroll underneath where you can adjust your microphone volume.
It sounds like it's coming from your end, Tosh, not my end. That sounds better, whatever you did. Are you there?
Okay, yeah. So I can hear your hum all the time, and look, it sounds like you can hear my hum when I'm
Yes,
speaking.
that's true. Yes. I can hear your hum, but I can't hear my own. But then again, I can't hear my own voice, except. So I don't know. I don't know what to do because it does sound pretty bad.
Yes.
See, as soon as you do that, whatever you did then brings on the hiss.
How's that?
That's better. Yes. What have you done?
I've turned my noise suppression to medium. So if you do the same, you see the noise suppression.
Are you still picking me up as noisy? Because I'm not hearing you as noisy at all.
Yes, I'm still picking you up as noisy.
Okay, so noise suppression to medium. Okay. There we go. How's that?
That's much better.
Oh, good. We can operate from there now. Okay.
Can I ask you to turn your microphone back up?
My mic is all the way up.
Okay, great.
There it is. It's all the way up.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Adventures with technology.
So
I am still getting quite a loud hiss coming through my end for some reason. Don't know why. Coming through my speaker system. Yeah, it's definitely coming. It's coming through the speaker system on my computer.
Right. Right. It is.
I don't.
It is a
I
lot
don't.
better than.
Sorry.
There's a slight hiss. There's a slight hiss. I can hear a slight hiss from your end, but it's not bad at all. I think we can run.
Okay. So, I have no idea where we were at. We were talking about people holding themselves in lower consciousness, I think.
Okay. I was about to ask you a question.
Okay.
How do I know if I'm in lower consciousness or not?
You don't. You know when when you're in higher consciousness, you know when everyone around you is in lower consciousness. But when you're in lower consciousness, you don't see a great deal because you're in lower consciousness. Lower consciousness is where we're projecting, where we're remembering, where we're analyzing, where we're dreaming, where we're thinking. And when you're caught in dream, you don't know that you're in lower consciousness, not usually. People think that thinking's not dream. All thinking's dream. You want to really, really see, be quiet, be silent inside, and then you can see.
What keeps people living in lower consciousness if that is where suffering occurs?
Ignorance. People don't realize that they create their own suffering. They usually are blaming something outside of themselves or a situation or another person, some event. And that usually they think the suffering is being created from outside of themselves. They are not conscious enough to realize that it is their own resistance to what is happening outside that is causing their suffering. They're just not conscious enough to realize that, so they don't. And they tend to be in blame. It's that person's fault or that situation's fault or even my own fault. They turn it on themselves, but they're not really seeing that we create our own reality by how we think. And if we're resisting life, we are creating suffering for ourselves, clearly creating suffering for ourselves.
So, what is the difference between lower or higher consciousness?
I first started noticing higher consciousness in people around me when I was 19 years old. I got involved with an organization called Focal that used to run 4-day encounter groups. And they also used to run business motivation seminars. And I started to realize that these guys that were running these classes or these encounter groups were switched on. They could see things that I simply couldn't see. They could understand things that I couldn't understand. And I wanted to know why. Why could they see things about people that I couldn't see? And it became clear after a while that what was happening was these people had investigated themselves, that they'd actually started to see how their own minds were ticking. They could see their levels of consciousness were higher than mine. And I became quite motivated to start raising my own consciousness levels. And it became very clear to me that I was keeping myself in lower consciousness because I was victim orientated. I used to run stories of blame. I used to worry. This keeps you in lower consciousness as well because it's all dream, it's all projection. And I realized there was a lot of belief systems I had that I'd have to now call limiting belief systems that also kept me in lower consciousness. Because when those belief systems had an expectation attached to them that wasn't met, I would go into victim orientated thinking. I'd start thinking there was something wrong outside of me. Then I start blaming and I start dreaming about someone's fault, what had done, how it hurt me. And it took me a while, but I got a clean, clear understanding that what I was doing was keeping myself locked in lower consciousness. In other words, switched off simply by dreaming and having you don't call victim-orientated thoughts nice dreams. They're nasty dreams. They're dreams where you think you're being hurt and you're blaming someone for it. And it seems real, but it's not. We're imagining the whole thing. What happens outside of us, it's the way the world is. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. How we react to it is what creates our reality. And so if you want to be switched on, stop reacting and start responding. And to be able to do that, your consciousness levels have to be relatively high. Someone who is really switched on is probably very cool because they're not reacting, they're responding. It's what I call true cool.
Is there a difference between higher consciousness and the consciousness levels that you're at?
So higher consciousness isn't super consciousness. Higher consciousness has everything to do with the mind still, has everything to do with how the mind works. So does lower consciousness for that matter. And so you don't tend to find animals that have higher consciousness because they don't have the ability to look at themselves. They don't have the ability to see the big picture like a human being can. But superconsciousness is a whole nother game. That's where that is aware of the mind becomes aware of itself and stays aware of itself. That is superconsciousness. At that point, more than likely, the mind has gained higher consciousness, is not reacting to the world, has become equanimous. And so the world might throw things at it, but it doesn't react. It's in a state of surrender. It's in a state of acceptance of life as it is. And this type of mind supports high consciousness, but it also supports superconsciousness, enlightenment. But that's up to you. You're the one that has to create that environment. Nobody can do it for you. And this is where people fail badly. They think that somehow someone else is going to do it for them. No, you're going to do it for yourself. And that's that. That's that. There's no way known anyone can raise your consciousness levels, really. Only you can do that. And for me, I was very fortunate in that I fell into the hands of some people who did have raised consciousness levels when I was 19. And I stayed with them for about 9 years. It was an organization called Focal Universal in Australia, and did all their courses many, many, many times over, and definitely changed the way I was living in the world for the better by removing limiting belief systems, by refusing to be a victim of life, and by stopping worry. Brilliant. But if you don't put the work in, if you don't move to alter your default patterning that may be detrimental to you, well, nothing's going to change. There's no magic wand that someone waves over you and goes, Alakazam, you're free of that. You have to do the work.
The following question has been written by Bhagavi on YouTube. I'm reading the book Tantra by Osho. It feels great and blissful. Like before, now I don't react much and have become a person of less words. How to sustain this in the marketplace with less words?
So what I discovered that to be in the marketplace and to be effective, you actually need words. Particularly if you've got a young family or you're an employer or an employee, either way, you need words to operate. It's not the words that you express out loud that count. It's the ones that you don't express inside yourself that count. In other words, the internal silence that you experience. And that internal silence comes from what I can say is just not entertaining the mind. We developed a habit when we went to school of entertaining the mind. So we could learn, remember, pass exams. And so we learned to live in our heads in the world of words and visions, images. Reclaiming reality from that is the practice of meditation, being present to what is real rather than present to the constant barrage of words. Osho's understanding of Tantra is very beautiful. But in true Tantra, there is no you, there is no other, you are one. True Tantra is the unconditional surrender to everything. And so the sense of separation disappears. You find that you are one with everything. And this is very beautiful. But this doesn't stop you from talking unless you wanted to. But if you want to take that into the world, it's easier if the mind is quiet. And this is why meditation is so good. It allows you to teach the mind to shut up and be quiet. And then you walk in the world, people talk to you, back to silence. Or you walk in the world and you constantly got something happening in your head. You've got a constant barrage of thoughts. Well, I wouldn't advocate that. Meditation works. You start witnessing the mind alone and you don't want to be playing with it because you see what it is. It's very beautiful just to be here and be present to what is real. But that takes practice because you've probably got default patterns of entertaining dream. And whatever default patterns we have, they're hard to change. You didn't have them before you went to school. You had a default pattern of being present to reality mostly, and then you went to school. So reclaim your reality from the dream that you're in through the practice of meditation, being present to whatever's real all the time. Up to you.
Next, Usha would like to ask a question.
Hello, Usha. Hello, Usha. I don't think she does, Tosh. She's not there.
Yes. Sarah would like to ask you a question.
Ah. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Vishrant.
I love your second name, Sarah Dharma.
Yeah.
I love
Fortunate by marriage. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Tosh. I would like to ask about predestination. There are some teachers that speak of it, that everything's preordained, and there's others that aren't. I was wondering if you could give some input on that.
Yeah. Look, it might be so. I get a feeling sometimes that it is. But whether it is or it isn't, you do what you have to do. Because it's not going to make a difference anyway. Whether it's predestined or it's not predestined, it's beyond your control. It's beyond your power. The wanting to understand it is even still trying to control it in some way. So from my perspective, I chose to serve heart about 30 odd years ago, which was very different for me because I was a businessman and I was serving self pretty much 100% of the time. And I decided to serve heart because I couldn't see a more beautiful way to be here. The service of self or selfishness becomes very hollow after a while. And you start to feel empty as a result of the lack of love that is involved in selfishness. But when you serve hard, you start to take care of, well, everything from the garden to friends to people who are strangers. You start working in a way in the world that is beautiful. So I didn't even know if there was a meaning to life, and I still don't, because I can't find one. But there is a way to live here, whether life is predetermined or not predetermined, and that is the way of the heart. And so that's what I chose, and that's what I teach, because it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful way to live. When we start talking about predestinations and things like that, it takes you into the mind too far. And truthfully, I don't like the mind much. I love reality. I like being just here with you. This is nice. If I go into my head and start thinking about things, I'm lost in a dream. I'm just not interested. And so, truthfully, I suspect that everything may be predestined, but I just don't. I absolutely don't really know. Not 100%. And even if it is, so what? What can we do about it? There's nothing we can do about it. So maybe it's predestined that I stopped being a businessman and started teaching the way of the heart. I don't know. I don't care either. But if I could give anyone a gift, the gift would be the heart, the way of the heart, because it's the most beautiful thing. Love is the true jewel of consciousness on this plane. So love to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. May I ask one more question?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a direct method of bringing the mind to the heart? Or is that just through intentional presence?
Okay. So the mind, love is always here. Just let me say that. Love is always here. It's not being perceived all the time. That's all. And the reason it's not being perceived is because the mind is closed, it's defended. If you open right up, there is love. It is here. But most people are defended in some way, consciously and unconsciously. And that those defense systems keep people away from love, perceiving love. And so love is something that you can't really approach with the mind. It's something that the mind needs to get out of the way to facilitate. And so openness facilitates love. And some people will have experienced this by taking drugs like ecstasy, where they've experienced amazing amounts of love. And all that happened was the drug opened the mind forcibly. And in that laying down of the ego because of a massive dose of amphetamine, they've experienced love, which is always here. It's just that they experienced it because their mind was knocked out. The defense systems were knocked away. And so openness, from my perspective, if you're interested in the way of the heart, counts for everything. So it's not a matter of bringing the mind to the heart or the heart to the mind. It's a matter of the mind getting out of the way. Walking through the world vulnerably instead of defended. With your heart on your sleeve instead of locked away somewhere. Every time someone does something that creates a contraction in you, it shows you where you're stuck. It shows you where you're closed. Existence is constantly giving you indications where you need to open. It's up to you what you're going to do, Sarah.
Let go.
Yes! That's the right answer. Let go, let go, let go. That is the right answer. but it's so foreign to us because we're just from just a psyche point of view, we're just a survival mechanism. And let go is not part of survival. Uh, it's part of death in a way. When we let go, we die. But it's only in death that we can know ourselves as truth, really.
Mm. Mm.
So if you could get inside my head, you'd notice that my mind is flatlined. And you'd go, whoa, where did it go? Well, it learned how to surrender. It learned how to let go. It practiced acceptance for long enough until it laid down.
And I guess that that duration of acceptance would vary from each individual.
Heck yeah. Look, it's not something we're taught at school. It's not something our parents teach us. It's something that you learn when you're getting into higher consciousness. That let go and surrender are the answer. But it's not common knowledge and it's not common practice either. Most people practice righteousness and arrogance. This is the world we live in. You find someone who's silent, you know you're near someone who's practiced let go. You know you're near someone who's practiced acceptance. That's why they're silent. And I'm not talking silent on the outside. I'm talking silent on the inside.
Mm. Mm. It's evident.
It's evident. And so people come and talk to me and I can feel them, I know what's happening. I know what they've been up to because I can feel them energetically. And if
Mm.
I'm meeting someone who's really quiet, I know that I'm meeting someone who's practiced a fair bit because it's not natural. It's more natural for people to be noisy and energetically heavy because we live in a society or a world that really supports victim orientated thinking, lower consciousness.
Mm.
Is there anything else there?
Nothing's coming to mind. Thank you so much.
I love that bit, Sarah, where nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, me
Thank,
too.
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next question has been written by a viewer. So, empathy of another's pain can be pleasurable if we are not resisting?
Wow, that's an odd question. Empathy of someone else's pain can be pleasurable. Why would it be pleasurable? I don't get that. Um, Empathy is empathy. You feel someone's pain, you feel it. It's not pleasurable. There's just no reaction to it if you're surrendered. And so you come into the presence of people who are in a lot of pain and you can feel their pain. But is there a reaction in you? Is there a resistance in you to it? Or is there an openness to it? The openness doesn't give you pleasure. It allows you get to feel the pain, but there's no reaction. You're free of that. And because you're free of that reaction, you can be of great help to those people if you want to be, because you're not caught in the drama that they're caught in. You're not caught in their suffering. So you can be helpful. Um, Surrender doesn't give you pleasure. It's a non-doing. It's a nothingness. And it can be practiced through acceptance and let go. At the moment, the world is suffering. Coronavirus. Places like India, there is terrible suffering because the virus is rampant. And my heart goes out to those people. It's very, very sad. But this is the world we live in. Everything that is born is going to die. It's going to get sick and it's going to die. Everything that is built is going to fall down. This is the understanding of impermanence. Yet we wander around thinking that somehow there's going to be a later and we're going to be in it and it's going to be okay. Truthfully, that's a dream. The understanding of impermanence allows us to get back to reality. And that when you realize that you might not see the person you're talking to again, you finish your business with them. When I say goodbye to someone, I don't know I'm going to see them again because I'm not living in a projection. That's my final goodbye. That's my final hello. And this catastrophe that is happening around the world, it allows us to witness the impermanence of life in our faces. And when you really understand impermanence, you don't take people for granted. You don't take anything for granted. You seize the moment because it's all you've got. Everything else is a dream.
The next question has been written by a YouTube viewer. When I listen to you speak, it is easy to be sattvic and silent. This sustains itself for a few days and then goes away. Why is it hard to maintain this when I don't listen to you speak? And what can I do?
Okay, someone who's carrying a presence can affect your mind. When you tune into someone who's carrying a presence, for a period of time, you can carry that presence to some degree. And that presence has the ability to quieten the mind, to still the mind. And so I discovered this when I first got together with Osho Rajneesh in 1984. His presence started to silence my mind. It was very beautiful. I fell in love with the presence. I fell in love with the peace that I was finding in the presence of this beautiful awake being. But what I also did was I started watching my mind because that's what he was teaching, witnessing the mind. And I got to see all of the things that were creating the noise. And I started to remove them. I started to take my mind apart. I wouldn't get involved in certain things anymore inside my head. And then when awakening occurred and awareness locked onto itself, people started coming to sit with me because they could feel the presence. They could feel the silence and the stillness. And they wanted it. They were falling in love with it. And it is in this love affair with truth that awakening occurs. And so my mind absolutely loves truth. And in that love, it is quiet. It has laid itself down in surrender. I don't think people wake up without that love affair of truth. You can self-inquire until the cows come home and keep coming back to being, to ego-based reality from beingness. It is in the love affair with truth that the mind truly surrenders unconditionally and gives itself to truth.
Next, we have a couple of questions written by Deezy. Ramana Maharshi says, God knows the past and the future. So my question is this correct if there is only right now?
I can confidently say I don't know. Ramana Maharshi, I took him on as one of my teachers, even though he died 4 years before I was born. I read everything and studied everything that was ever written about him or anything he said, and I found him to be a wonderful teacher. But unless something is my own direct knowing, to me, it's in the maybe column. And that means I don't know. And so that has not been my direct knowing. I have a suspicion about it. But until something is my own direct seeing or knowing, it is in the maybe box. And I'm confident in saying I don't know.
The follow-up question was, and if so, does God experience our experiences at the same time as us, or does he do it ahead of us and still let it happen, such as pain, pleasure, etc.?
See, there's a projection that there's a God there. There's a projection that there's a God that's a man, in fact, because you called him he. And I don't trust that projection. I don't think that human beings' minds are capable of really understanding the gravity of being everything at once, which is God. Someone who's awake can experience that or know that, but they still can't describe it. Not possible. So once again, we come to I don't know. And we have a look at, well, why do people want to know? And it comes down to wanting to control. In Buddhism, they talk about being the beginner, always being the beginner, having a beginner's mind. And a beginner doesn't know. And because the beginner doesn't know, the universe can pour into the beginner. The moment we think we know, we're closed. And in closure, we're blocking ourselves off from everything, including love. And so, unless something's absolutely my direct knowing and experience, I do not know.
Next, Abai would like to ask a question.
Hello, Abai.
Hello, Vishrant.
Hello.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that can I work on raising my consciousness levels at any age?
Heck yeah. Though I got to tell you, Abai, it is harder as you get older because the default patterns become more hardwired. And so when we talk about raising our consciousness levels, we're also talking about changing default patterns that keep us locked in lower consciousness. To change any default pattern takes effort. And the older we get, the harder it is to change because the default patterns have been in place for so long. But it's absolutely possible at any age to change default patterns. What I find as a teacher is that people who are older tend to not want to do the work. And so it's more difficult for them. People who are younger tend to be more enthusiastic. And we're really interested in changing the default patterns of our mind because they're detrimental to us, we need to be enthusiastic, no matter what age you're at.
Okay. Thank you, Vishrant.
Thank you, Abai.
The next question is from a viewer. What is the easiest way to start to turn off the robot mind?
What part of the mind do you think is not robot? I think that all of the mind is robot. And so you're talking about switching the mind off. Well, then you have probably brain death. The mind is needed to navigate the material world. Without a brain, without a mind, the body won't survive. So the mind's not the enemy. It's just in the way sometimes, particularly the I. But the mind has the ability to facilitate higher consciousness and has the ability to facilitate turning awareness onto itself through self-inquiry. And so the mind is not the enemy. It just needs to be used in a way that will support higher consciousness rather than in a way that supports lower consciousness. That is all. It switches off every night anyway, pretty much, when you go into deep sleep, but not completely, because if it did, your heart wouldn't keep beating. You wouldn't keep breathing. Some people see the mind as the enemy. I don't see it as the enemy. I just see it as something that needs to support what you want to do rather than not support what you want to do. You train the mind to support higher consciousness. That's best.
Next question has been written by Vanita. Forget the dancer and be the dance, says Osho. So Vishrant, in that case, do the dancer and dance become one? Where is the witness in this case? There is just witnessing, just presence. The dance and dancer become one. Does that simply mean that ego is absent in this case?
Yes. Yes, I was a dancer and I loved to dance and I loved to dance for hours. And the I would disappear and I would become the dance. And it was very beautiful being a nobody and dancing. It was lovely. And so Osho was talking about the absence of the ego. Because when you become the dance, the I is gone. You are just the dance. It's lovely. It's a way towards higher consciousness in itself. It's also a celebration of life to dance. Nice. Don't stop dancing.
The next question is from a viewer. When I witness my mind stays quiet, maybe because I think it's scared of being seen. How do I get it to talk more while I'm witnessing?
Don't encourage it, just witness it. And if you're witnessing it long enough, it starts to behave in its natural way, which allows you to see how it really is operating. And so you develop this practice of just watching the mind, like you'd be watching some wild animal to see what it does out in the field. Not totally detached from it, no judgments about it, just witnessing. And in that witnessing, the mind gets to see itself very clearly. And as a result of that seeing, it's harder for it to be involved in certain activities inside itself because it can see clearly that those activities are detrimental to itself. So you just keep witnessing the mind, but you do it all the time, not just for an hour or half an hour or 20 minutes. You watch the mind all the time and you start developing a certain separation from it. That's very peaceful. Practice and see. Witnessing the mind, or being the witness to the mind, is a pathway to enlightenment.
The following question has been written by Paul. What role does karma play in waking up? Does it prevent the awakening from occurring if there are still negative or positive experiences yet to happen?
Okay. From my understanding of karma, everything is karmic. Everything that happens is karmic. It's all just energy balancing out. And in this way, I'm quite a fatalist. So anything negative happens, I see, well, that was meant to happen, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. Anything positive happens, well, that was meant to happen, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. It's all just karma playing out. I don't think there's anyone manipulating karma in any way. But as far as awakening is concerned, there must be a karmic element in it. I know that after awakening occurs, karma can continue to play out on the body because it's the body and the mind that accumulate the karma. But it has nothing to do with what's witnessing it. That's purely the witness, purely consciousness that's witnessing is not touched by karma. It's not touched by anything. And so in someone who's awake, because they're living as beingness, they're not being touched by anything. The body might be. It might be paying out karmas, but what they are, what we are, is not touched by anything. It may play a role in it. I remember going to a monastery once and asking the Ajahn about enlightenment. And he said, well, you need to get enough good karma to become a monk. And I said, well, how do you do that? And he said, well, you become generous. You start giving things to people. You become a generous person. And that was his understanding of karma and how it led towards enlightenment. You had to become a monk first. Well, I didn't buy the bit about having to become a monk first. All you have to do is learn to surrender. That sounds very easy, but it's actually quite difficult. Learn how to surrender. Learn how to let go. Learn how to give up. Learn how to not resist. This is really cool. And the other thing is about being present to reality. Stop dreaming. Put your awareness on what is real and stay with what is real. That becomes a habit after a while. The same as dreaming is a habit for most humans. Same as closeness is a habit for most human beings. You want to develop some good habits that'll help in enlightenment. Practice openness. Develop a habit of being open. Practice being present to reality. Develop a habit of present moment awareness to what is real. These are great habits, but they take practice. Karma. I think everything's karma.
The next question has been written by a viewer. Why is it a love affair with truth and not a love affair with love perception?
Okay. So first, I fell in love with truth because in the presence of my teachers, I felt the Buddha field and I fell in love with it. At some point later, I fell in love with love. My mind, let's put it that way, fell in love with love and became a servant of love. It became a servant of love because it realized that, well, it still had to be here. And the way of the heart is a beautiful way to be here. And it fell in love with love. And it did what was required to facilitate love, which was open right up. It just so happens that opening right up also facilitates enlightenment. And so the way of the heart, which is sometimes called the bhakti path or a devotional path, works, particularly if the person who's devotional practices openness. In openness, the I disappears. The I itself is a form of resistance or closure. You just practice openness until there's nothing left. And the mind falls in love with love. And for me, it fell in love with truth as well. And so it serves two. It serves love and it serves truth. And it noticed in the early days that there was a deal. And the deal was simple. Everything for love and nothing for me. Everything for truth and nothing for me. And it's the best deal in town.
How is serving heart related to higher consciousness?
It demands surrender. It demands acceptance. And higher consciousness also demands acceptance and surrender. In lower consciousness, we're resisting, we're contracting. It's very different. In higher consciousness and in love, there is surrender, there is acceptance, because it's in that openness of mind that love is perceived. It is in that openness of mind that awareness, aware of itself, is supported. A mind that is constantly contracting and going into resistance is actually supporting lower consciousness, not supporting higher consciousness. And so the practice of acceptance allows you to have a mind that doesn't resist. But that takes practice. It doesn't happen by itself. When things stop ticking you off, something touches you, instead of reacting and closing, you find that you remain open where you've done the work on that spot. It's not that the work stops you from being touched by the way the world is, but the work stops the reaction to the touch, stops the resistance and the contraction that occurs to the touch. And so you walk through the world very vulnerable, very open, and things still touch. But most people wouldn't even know they've touched you because there is no reaction. There may be a response, but the reaction's dropped because you're too conscious to react. The best way to enlightenment is the practice of openness. Openness counts for everything. Thank you for Satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.